Good morning. Welcome to season 2 of the Neurodivergent podcast. I am your host, Jannice Jones, the Neurodivergent positive psychologist. We are kicking off this season with a wonderful guest, Alice Running. Alice is the author of various books and articles, including Helping Your Child with PDA Live a Happier Life, which I love the cover of that book, by the way, and Parental Blame and the PDA Profile of Autism, and also has written many articles, including Double Empathy and Professional Scrutiny of Autistic Families. So, hi, Alice, welcome. Please
Hello.
introduce yourself to the listeners. Tell them, who are you and what do you do?
Okay, so I'm Alice. First and foremost, I am mum to two beautiful children. They're grown up now, and so I should stop calling them children. And I'm a writer and author and advocate, really, I suppose, is the general word. Really care about social justice, and my background's in sociology, really. And so whenever I look at autism services and systems of SEND and things like that, I'm always looking at it through sociological lens and justice and equity. So that's really where I'm coming from. Autistic myself. Didn't find out I was autistic until I was in my mid-40s, after seeking support for my children and going through their diagnostic processes. Yeah, that pretty much sums it up. I have done a lot of writing, because I'm not a big fan of speaking, so I'm really pushing myself out of my comfort zone.
And I really thank you for that. It's brilliant. Thank you for saying yes.
Recently, just done a PGC in autism to get some theoretical understanding to underpin my lived experience. But mostly I'm from a lived experience perspective and parenting. Although I speak less about my children nowadays and more about kind of myself and being an autistic mother and how that's viewed.
Fantastic. And you mentioned there the word SEND. I understand what that means, but do you want to just explain what SEND is for the audience who might not understand that?
So it's an acronym, Special Educational Needs and Disabilities. Is that right? Yeah. So it is kind of an umbrella term, isn't it, for all the support services you might need to access for your child.
My children, who were both neurodivergent, when they were growing up, I'd never heard the term SEND. I'd never heard of, SPLDs. I'd never heard, there was just so much stuff that I hadn't come across. I think because of social media and articles and books and things, parents do tend to be a bit more informed today, which I'm really, really happy about.
Definitely.
I'm not sure all the organisations are, but the parents definitely are.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thinking the same thing there, yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. So today we're going to be talking about a number of things, but in particular autism and PDA and how what PDA might be termed as, not in terms of clinical, but just your understanding of what the term autism and PDA actually means.
Okay. So it's such a big question. So thinking about autism, I kind of differentiate between autism and being autistic. So autism I see as like the clinical label and the clinical diagnosis of something that other people have put together as a condition, and there are lots of flaws within seeing it in that way, but it can provide a useful label, I guess, and signpost to the right support. Being autistic, my personal view is that it's just a thing. It's just part of human nature, and I don't see it as being any better or worse than anything else. It's just a loose term almost to describe and think about how your own brain works and getting the best for yourself. And society needs all kinds of different kinds of brains,
It
And
certainly does,
yeah,
especially today, isn't
yeah,
it?
absolutely. And
Especially today.
I do think of neurodivergence as kind of just human nature using the best skills from everyone, you know, almost in that
Yeah,
kind of manner. With my sociology brain, I can see how like society is built for non-autistic people and non-neurodivergent people, and that's where the difficulties come in. Is
yeah,
how society is constructed and
yeah,
how schooling in particular is constructed. So in terms of
absolutely.
me being autistic, I see it in a just a positive way. It's nice to have an identity. It's nice to look back and realize that that's perhaps why life has been the way it has. So you've kind of got a bit of an understanding about yourself,
Yeah,
so, and you can, you know, you can find other like-minded people. So it's helpful in that way. But other than that, I don't, you know, although all my work is around being autistic, it's just my norm. It's normal, yeah. And then in terms of PDA, so you know, officially as the acronym expands to pathological demand avoidance.
yeah,
A lot of other people like to use pervasive drive for autonomy. Um, Obviously, there's a big debate about whether it fits within the autistic profile, whether
yes,
it's, you know, something aside from that. But again, going back to, you know, it's humans that create the labels. How I understand it is that for some people, um, just being needing to be really in control of their own lives to mitigate against fear, anxiety. Some people consider it like a nervous system reaction or condition. Some people
yeah,
consider it to be like a rational protection against the non autistic world. I'm not 100% sure even where I stand on it. I kind of look at it from a practical point of view, in that when I've been supporting my children, it's been useful to have a framework to talk about why traditional autism strategies might not work and how to kind of get the best in terms of engagement and, you know, build relationships with my
yeah,
children to help them
yeah.
thrive. So
Great.
yeah, that's basically where I'm
Well,
from.
I coach some people whose children are classed as PDA, as having PDA, and they talk a lot about scaffolding, the need to both understand what's going on with their children, but also how scaffolding is absolutely essential from the parent's point of view. So you talked about the different ways of calling what PDA actually stands for. My understanding more is around that pathological demand avoidance, and that needing autonomy being at the core of any sort of demand is incredibly difficult for the child or the individual. Any demand whatsoever, or whether real or perceived, is difficult. When you think about your own children, what types of things did you do that help with that sort of scaffolding around not making too many demands on them? What types of things helped you?
Um, Overall, just the concept of less is more, really. Um, Taking a big stand back, not trying to problem solve too much myself, letting them work through um, problem solving in their own way, presenting choices. So, you know, I mean, getting out of the house was a really big issue for some years, and I use kind of a mixture of strategies. So some kind of more typical autism strategies were really useful in terms of scheduling the week ahead, and so that
Yes,
having an idea, you know, being forewarned about what was happening. But then within that, offering as many choices, but limiting the choices, because too many choices became
too
quite
many choices. Yeah,
overwhelming. Um,
yeah,
but then also having the flexibility, perhaps in my own mind, to consider plans B, plan C, and
yeah,
what might happen if, you know, plan A doesn't work. Really, for us, it's just been, as they've gotten older and they've been able to have more autonomy around their own decision making about what they want to do with their own lives, the
Yes.
aspects of avoidance have kind of have lessened somewhat. Yeah. Um,
So how
and
old are they now?
um, well, I don't like talking about children too much, but they're nearly 18 and 23.
Great,
So
great. Now mine are 35 and 33. So yeah,
yeah,
you know, yeah, they are. We can still have challenges, but it's not necessarily the same challenges or the same degree, is
yeah,
it? Okay, fantastic. You also mentioned about when we were, going to have this conversation about the fact that there is that diagnostic delay relating to PDA, and also difficulties for parents in accessing any sort of PDA specific support. Can you talk a little bit about what the challenges are there?
well, firstly, it's just a postcode lottery, isn't it? So it's completely
Yeah,
dependent on where you are in the country as to whether it's deemed a real thing for one, whether
yeah,
what the state of the autism offer is in that area,
yeah,
and then secondary to that, the depends on whether your own professionals that are working with you, what their thoughts and feelings are around on it, because there are no real, I mean, there are nice guidelines. There's local authority kind of own policy guidelines, and
yeah,
some local authorities have issued position statements, but many haven't around,
yeah,
what they consider PDA to be. And I think the best kind of situations are where maybe offers are around need rather than diagnostic label, but as a
yeah,
parent, that often doesn't help, and you can be without a label and be rooted down very detrimental pathways. You can, for example, more like parenting courses, which are going to be completely useless. So diagnostic labels at that point can be really, really useful to make sure that you're getting the right support. But as we know, waiting times, 2 years, 5 years. I think 7 years at work that I heard someone talk about recently, and they were just, well, there's not any point putting my child on the assessment waiting list because they're going to have finished school by the time
yeah.
the assessments come through. And that's heartbreaking, isn't it? um
It's appalling. Yeah.
yeah,
But it is
yeah,
the situation for so many in the UK, isn't it? I mean,
yeah,
this podcast is listened to all over the world. I mean, literally. So I don't know, we can't speak to what it's like in other countries, but
yeah,
definitely in the UK,
yeah.
any sort of anything to do with neurodiversity, mental health, everything like that is just so underfunded, and the waiting
Mm,
lists are horrific for children. They just are. And I know certainly from, as I say, coaching the women that I've coached who do have children with PDA, that they've also talked about that it's not just the organizations not understanding, but how they feel they have been judged really harshly and detrimentally
mm,
because the organizations that they're dealing with don't understand what PDA is,
yeah,
don't understand, some of the challenges and a lot of the challenges around it. They're not even that well versed in autism, let alone PDA, and how that has then affected them and how hard they have had to fight
mm,
to try and get the organizations to understand what the real challenges are, and that it's not about bad parenting. They've had that sort of label chucked at them on numerous occasions when it's nothing to do with bad parenting. It's to do with the system not understanding the needs of the
mm,
children
mm,
or the needs of the parents, and just trying to label them as something that they, absolutely not. So
mhm.
what's it that been in your experience? What have you experienced?
Well, absolutely. Just going back to what you were speaking about there, with not having kind of PDA written down anywhere, and like perhaps autism strategies, autism support being put in place, and that not working, and I'm putting that in air quotes, certainly how professionals are seeing it as not working, then they're starting to think, oh well, it's the parents being obstructive, when in fact it's a lack of understanding, a lack of resources. So this was very much why we undertook the survey. So the parental blame and the PDA profile of autism. It was a survey that myself and Danielle Jarter Hall did in 2022, and then I analysed that and wrote it up, and it was published in 2023. So that was like 88% of parents with an autistic PDA child had experienced some kind of blame whilst trying to access support, and they were getting blamed for just completely normal autistic behaviour, ways of being. Don't like the word behaviour. So yeah, it's endemic. It's across all the systems, and I think it has like a functional use because it's preventing. It's almost gatekeeping resources, isn't it? So your child needs perhaps a type of I don't know, say like sensory play, for example, could be quite expensive. It's a parental fault, then you don't have to put that in place. So I think it stems from a lot of that, and just almost like narratives building up throughout a journey. So very often parents recognise that their child's neurodivergent really early on in life.
But I certainly did with my son.
Schools may not, and school professionals may not, and at best they're going to have very limited training around what autism is, and that profile of autism that they think is autism is like a stereotypical view, and when they have a child there that doesn't match that,
that's it.
Then and the more you fight for your child, the more you're at risk of looking like an obstructive parent, a difficult parent, or someone who is making up diagnoses, for example. So one of the early things that happened for us, so with high levels anxiety, was getting rerouted through mental health services, and one professional, quite a low tier professional, instantly saying, no, they're most definitely not autistic, we're going to refer you to family therapy. And I stood up to that, I challenged that, and I said, no, I'm sorry, that's not the case. I really think they need an assessment. I will go and pay for one. I will go and do an independent assessment. And because I'd uttered those words, we were flagged as a risk. I was flagged as a risk because I challenged this.
That's
and
horrific.
Of course, obviously, a few years later, yes, they're clearly autistic.
But I mean, the fallout from that for parents of children who are autistic and PDA in particular is trauma. You're already dealing with a really challenging situation, and you are completely under-resourced in dealing with that challenge, and probably undereducated and under-supported and everything. And then on top of that, you're then having to fight organizations that are supposedly there to support you, who are actually then traumatizing you in that whole process. I mean, it's horrific, isn't it? It's absolutely horrific. But I mean, as I say, I know others who have experienced exactly the same. And that, if you want to say the name of that report that you did into where you said, there was a really high percentage of parents, what was the name of that report, if people want to actually look that up?
It's Parental Blame and the PDA Profile of Autism. So it was originally hosted on the PDA Society website, but they've had a big website redesign, so now it would have to be accessed through my own website, which is alicerunningswriter.com or alicerunningsautismadvocacy.com. I was going to come back with something.
So I was talking about trauma that, that families can experience as a result of this.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a Professor Luke Clements has a brilliant phrase. He calls it systems generated trauma, and it
Yeah.
places the trauma right back at the source. So it's not parents, it's not parental mental health.
No.
It is a direct result of the systems that you have to battle to get
Yes.
believed, to get support, and then you are blamed. And in,
Yeah.
certain families, horrifically so. Uh, it's not unheard of for mothers to have their children removed, child protection procedures to be
Oh my goodness.
instigated, and that report, the PDA and parental blame report, one of the big findings from that was the cyclical nature of using mental health as a blaming narrative. So
Yeah.
a lot of mothers in particular, it does happen to fathers too, but it's predominantly mothers, would be told at the outset, it's your mental health. You are causing anxiety within your child. And,
Appalling.
they know that it's not. They know that, they're doing a really good job. But then once they've gone through, like, navigating all the support systems, they come out the other side with tangible mental health conditions like
Yeah.
trauma,
Yeah.
PTSD,
Yeah.
anxiety, physical reactions. I've spoken to some women who have had strokes, heart attacks,
Wow.
because of the pressure that the systems put them under. I think I've escaped quite well, quite luckily, but the after effects of trauma really, really do take hold. So just before we were recording today, I had an unknown phone call just pop up, and it was a medical appointment for myself, just something completely unrelated to
Yeah.
my children whatsoever. But not knowing that I was going to have that phone call, not knowing who was on the other end of it,
Yeah.
has just really shaken me up. Um, I
Yeah.
just thought, oh crikey, what's this? And I
Yeah.
still get that same kind of, like, your stomach sinking, even though
Yeah.
both my children are at home with me. They're nearly adults. Well, one is an
Yes.
adult, one's very close. I'm still thinking it's someone to come and take my children away. That's the
Yeah.
baseline fear that I think
It's the
so many
baseline.
neurodivergent, particularly autistic families live with. Um,
Yeah.
One of the other key things that came out of the survey that we did was the predominance for autistic mothers, neurodivergent mothers in particular, to
Yeah.
be affected by safeguarding procedures. And that stat was found again with Luke Clements did some work around FII, fabricated induced illness, and found the same thing. Autistic mothers 4 times more likely to be accused of fabricated and induced illness, which is a safeguarding, a really serious safeguarding allegation, than non-autistic mothers. And I mean, that's just
Yeah.
blatant discrimination.
It is. I think it's blatant discrimination, but it actually comes out of a complete lack of understanding, education, knowledge, wisdom. They just don't know what they don't know. But it's like, please, can you catch up? Because there are so many families who are being targeted and traumatized as a result of being treated in this way, when it's actually not their problem, as you say, in that wonderful report that you talked about, the other chap, where he said it's a system. It's the
Mm,
system that is traumatizing the individuals, and we can see that clearly, can't we? Especially in
yeah,
this arena. So
mm,
we're nearly coming, I could sit and talk to you all day, Alice, because you've obviously got, you've got so much experience and knowledge and wisdom in this area. But I like to keep the podcast to less than 30 minutes because, that's what a lot of listeners like. But I personally could talk to you all day. Um, so, just to finish on, the term double empathy. So, I understand you often hear the term double empathy within when talking about autism. And as an autistic person and parent myself, My understanding of it is, so if I was to talk about communication between myself and another autistic person, it's like we're both autistic. We get on really well. We can understand each other perfectly well. But that the double empathy problem, it was always looked at that the problem of communication was always on the side of the autist, whereas actually now it's understood that actually autists, on the whole, communicate really well with each other, as do allistic or non-autistic people can communicate well with each other. The problem is both sides. It's not just on the side of the autistic individual. Is that your understanding of the double empathy problem?
Yeah, more or less. It's a really useful framework, I think, to look certainly at parent-professional interactions. I find it really fascinating to use double empathy within
Great.
those kind of frameworks because, as you say, it's challenging the idea that autistic people lack the communication skills, and
Yeah,
whenever there's a breakdown in communication or a misunderstanding, that it must be because of something lacking within an autistic person.
that's
So
right.
instead, I like to think of it as like a framework. So instead it's about who holds the responsibility for any miscommunication or lack of shared
Yeah,
understanding, and
yeah,
both people within any communication hold that responsibility. But if you are in a situation where you are a non-autistic person, you are in a position of power, perhaps like clinical or like a
yeah,
social worker or something, and you know that that other person is autistic, or you are working within a divergent family, then
yes,
you have responsibility to ensure that your way of communicating will create a shared understanding
yeah,
between the two of you. And I think that's certainly where I find it very interesting, because certainly in relation to navigating CAMS, shall I say CAMS, child
yeah,
and
yeah.
adolescent mental health services,
Mental health for
um,
children.
who
Yeah,
are, de facto autism experts, again in air quotes,
yeah,
when they're having a family meeting with a child who has been assessed and diagnosed as being autistic, logic would suggest that perhaps other members of that family would be in some way neurodivergent, and yet
absolutely.
their adaptability to make any kind of meeting or conversation accessible for
Yes,
either party, you know even
yeah,
if you weren't autistic, sometimes things aren't accessible. And I think what double empathy theory does for autistic people is it challenges where the responsibility is to create the shared understanding.
yeah. I
Yeah.
totally hear you on that one. It's not our problem. It's a we or a you, not a us. Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. And I'm just aware that, we have talked about some deep things like trauma for the individual parent or families as a direct result of, working with organizations, and that they might be wondering where they can get some help with this. Now, if they're in the UK and they either know or suspect that their child is autistic, or in particular has pathological demand avoidance, where can they go for help, Alice? What can they do?
Well, my first advice as a parent would be to speak to other parents, that find your local autism group.
Yeah,
They're usually the font of all local knowledge and have so much
great,
experience, and can really help with your strategy of next steps. And
great,
yeah, because they'll know the local waiting times, they'll know how local professionals view things. If you're wanting like advice with PDA specifically, the PDA Society, absolutely fantastic. Very
brilliant,
neuro affirming, great. I
wonderful.
think they have a support service. In terms of trauma, parental trauma, I'll just end with this because I was reading like an article about this that had been written by community mental health professionals, and it was advocating for, if you have a traumatized parent, your typical approaches for, talking therapies for PTSD, for example, or
Yeah.
CBT approaches are unlikely to work because you
Yeah.
have to have gotten over the traumatic event must have ended for
That's
the
it.
talking therapy to work. And what's interesting with parents navigating SEND systems is that trauma is ongoing, it's persistent, it's chronic. So
Yes.
therefore, your typical strategies of helping with that trauma
Yeah.
aren't necessarily going to be effective.
No,
And I don't
that's
think there
right.
is anything in place that I know of that specifically really helps with that, unless you find a really good independent counsellor who would understand neurodivergence, trauma, and that kind of chronic aspect of trauma.
Yeah. I hear you, because it is 100%, until the child leaves home or gets beyond the education system. That worry is constant, isn't it? It's there. That fear
Mm,
is there that at some
mm,
point, something can happen, or you can be judged as being wrong in what you're doing or what, and yet always parents know their children.
yeah,
At the end of the day, parents know their children better than anybody else
yeah.
does. And yet often they're not listened to, are they? They're not taken
Mm,
into account, and they
and
are disbelieved.
yeah, yeah. And like, parents of autistic children are the most proactive parents I have ever met, so
Yeah,
motivated to support their children.
amazing.
Parental research is looked as like a safeguarding flag. But if you know your child needs something, you're going to go out
Yeah,
of your way to find out
that's
what
it.
that is to make your child happy, settled, and
Yeah,
less distressed. So
that's it.
it's not a flaw, it's a real
No,
positive attribute that parents hold. And it just makes me so sad that it's quite often flipped and used as a concerning trait within parent. Yeah.
absolutely. It's really sad, but there is some hope. So people could, by your helping your child with PDA live a happier life, they could buy that. They could go to your website. Can you tell me what your website is again?
It's alicerunningadvicacy.com or alicerunningwriter.com. They both end up on the same page.
Yes, and that's running with a double N, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And the PDA Society, the Great Britain one, would that be .org.uk, or just if they search PDA Society UK?
I would have to check. Do you have show notes? Could you put it in the show notes? Because I know that I've made the fatal flaw of emailing the wrong email address, and thinking I was emailing the PDA Society, and it actually being answered by a library in America. It wasn't good. Um,
Oh, wonderful. But anyway, if they search just PDA Society UK, I'm sure it will come up if they search for that. Fantastic. And if they wanted to contact you directly, is that possible, or are they better
yeah,
just going to your website?
yeah. You can Alice running writer at gmail.com. There's another advocacy email address which is on my website. I must just do a quick plug for my new book, which is due out in March 2026 next year,
Yeah,
towards the end of March, I think. And it's called We Need to Talk About Autism and Parent Blame. So it is a deep, in depth look at, how society blames autistic
great.
families.
Yeah,
Yeah,
fantastic. And that's coming out in March next year.
it is. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, please look out for that book. by helping your child with PDA live a happier life, or Parental Blame and the PDA Profile of Autism. And look out for her new book. Can you say the name again? That's coming out in March.
We need to talk about autism and parent blame. I'm still getting it right in my head.
Wonderful.
I've had so many conversations with the publishers about what it should be called.
Yeah,
I think that's a
fantastic.
definite one.
But I'm neurodivergent, so it went in one ear and straight out the other because I didn't write it down. I've got very poor working memory. Anyway, thank you so much for being on the podcast today, Alice. It's been a real pleasure.
Oh, it's lovely
Before we
talking to you.
close, thank you. I'd like to remind you that I start training the next cohort of specialist neurodiversity coaches on October the 8th this year. If you are interested in finding out more about this 16-week, it's very, very practical coaching training course where we do cover all aspects of neurodiversity. So ADHD, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, Tourette's, and it's a very practical course with lots of coaching experience as well. Please get in touch at support@jannicejones.com, and that's Janice with a double N. Or if you are looking for a specialist neurodiversity coach for yourself, please also reach out. So support@janicejones.com, or go on to my website, www.janicejones.com, and that's Janice with a double N. So thank you all for being here and listening to this podcast. I know it goes out all around the world, and it's just wonderful that people listen in and keep coming back and listening to more episodes. And watch out for the rest of season 2, because I've got some fantastic guests like Alice coming along. So I look forward to speaking to you next time. And once again, thank you, Alice, for a wonderful session.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye.
Bye bye.